The first tremor hit just after midnight, subtle at first, like the hum of a generator too many layers down in a subterranean lab. Dr. Alara Miles felt it through the steel soles of her boots before the sensors blinked. Around her, the quantum dynamics lab's normally sterile corridors vibrated in ways that defied all protocol. Nothing in the simulations had ever suggested this pattern. A recursive oscillation, faint but persistent, threading through the building like a pulse from some unseen engine. She froze, her breath catching in the filtered air. Across the complex, monitors flickered in unison. A warning tone sliced through the comm-net. Anomalous temporal activity detected. Alara's stomach twisted. They had opened a door that should never exist. Colonel Rail Thorne arrived at the lab's entry with his usual storm of pragmatism and anger. His sharp eyes scanned the oscillation charts, each waveform more incomprehensible than the last. "Explain," he barked. Alara's fingers flew across her console. "It's not a failure. The system is stable, but the loop, it's repeating itself outside linear time. Every microsecond cycles back on itself. We're seeing echoes of events that haven't happened yet, or maybe already have." Her voice trembled despite her best effort to sound certain. "Temporal loops," Thorne said, flat, as though the words were a kind of ammunition. "In the field, this is a death sentence. In theory, you're telling me this lab just created, what? A perpetual time anomaly." Alara nodded. "Yes, but it's small, contained. We were careful until the energy spiked 2 minutes ago." It looks like she hesitated, swallowing hard, like the loop is self-propagating. Outside, Lieutenant Kianvara adjusted the stabilizers on the prototype drone swarm. He hadn't touched this tech in months, but the labs had requested an immediate field test. The drones, built for reconnaissance and tactical disruption, were meant to map and adapt to enemy movement. Now, they flickered on and off, their onboard AI reacting not just to physical space, but to anomalies in the temporal field. Kian frowned. They're predicting each other's paths before they execute them. That shouldn't be possible. Meanwhile, Liaison Commander Mira Selvik, stationed in the government oversight bunker linked via encrypted subspace comm, watched a live feed of the facility. She had been skeptical of the time loop experiment from the beginning. Her orders were clear: prevent any breach into civilian domains. Now, seeing recursive energy surges puncturing the lab's shielding, she pressed the issue. "Contain it, or I pull the plug on the entire project. You understand the stakes, Dr. Miles?" Alara's hands moved faster over the controls. The loop's oscillations weren't violent yet. They weren't tearing the lab apart, but they were subtly rewriting micro-decisions. Drones would start a maneuver, then rewind, correcting something she couldn't predict. Even the lab's air pressure systems seemed to hiccup in advance of her commands, forcing her to compensate as though she were trying to anticipate herself. She felt the edges of her mind blur. The first skirmish with reality arrived silently. A test drone, barely 20 meters from the lab's primary containment array, flickered and disappeared, then reappeared in the exact same spot moments before it had vanished. Kian yelped, his hands trembling on the controls. It's looping. We can't track it." Thorne, never patient with panic, barked orders. "All units, abort the external test. Seal the containment field. Now." But the loop had already begun to reach outward. Outside, in the barren testing field, the ground quivered as though the earth itself recoiled. Small kinetic tremors rattled the outer fences. Sensors recorded conflicting readings. The same particle detected simultaneously in 2 locations, its momentum impossible. Thorne watched the displays, jaw tight, muscles coiled. He realized the problem wasn't simply a lab anomaly. It was spreading. Myra's voice cut through comm channels, sharp and dispassionate. "Colonel, you have 30 seconds to confirm containment, or I authorize a full remote shutdown. That includes everything: research, equipment, personnel." Thorne's eyes flicked to Alara. 30 seconds? "Alara, what's your recommendation?" Alara's mind raced through every simulation she had run, every theoretical model. In every scenario, shutting the system down abruptly risked catastrophic feedback, energy spikes that could destabilize the loop beyond the lab. We can't just cut it, she said. If we shut it down now, the feedback could erase the facility's last 6 hours entirely, including personnel in the test bay. Her words hit the colonel like ice. Thorne ground his teeth. Then we improvise. Kian, get the drone swarm into a closed loop around the core. No individual drones outside the perimeter. Alara, divert auxiliary power to stabilization grids. Mira, you're going to have to trust us for the next 60 seconds. Kian's fingers flew. The drones responded like a single organism, weaving a lattice of kinetic shields around the containment field. They moved with preternatural precision, dodging their own mirrored shadows caused by the loop. Alara rerouted auxiliary energy, watching telemetry spike and dip in ways she couldn't fully comprehend. Each correction birthed a new anomaly. She felt herself chasing herself through time. The loop's first counterintuitive weakness revealed itself when the drones, acting independently yet predictively, began to collide with phantom versions of themselves. The collisions didn't destroy them. Instead, each impact seemed to stabilize their trajectories temporarily. Kian noticed it and shouted, "It's the loops. They're self-canceling if we force intersections." Alara realized immediately that this principle could scale. If they could engineer controlled collisions, they might constrain the loop long enough to stabilize the core. But executing it required perfect timing and coordination. Human reflexes alone wouldn't suffice. They would need a combination of AI, precise predictive algorithms, and brute force experimentation under live conditions. "Prepare for manual override," Thorne said. His voice was calm now, lethal in its simplicity. He signaled Kian to initiate the synchronized collision sequence. The drones shivered and pulsed as they obeyed, converging at nodes calculated by Alara's hastily improvised algorithms. Energy readings spiked, arcs of raw temporal flux leaping between units. The lab shuddered. Myra's voice, now tense, came through comm channels. "Containment status? Stabilizing," Alara said, though every fiber of her body screamed doubt. "The loop is resisting. But these collisions, every second they hold a pattern, they gain us more time." Time itself seemed to stretch. Each second felt like a minute, and every minute felt like a heartbeat compressed into the span of an eye blink. The lab's hum turned into a low roar. Sparks from the stabilization grids arced across the walls, a visual echo of the loop's internal friction. Kian's fingers flew across the console, sweat streaming down his face, guiding drones into positions that were simultaneously too early and too late. Then came the first casualty. A drone, mid-collision, phased entirely out of existence for a fraction of a second before returning with its onboard system scrambled. Kian cursed, hitting manual overrides. Alara realized with dread that each corrective measure was exacting a toll. Every collision stabilized the loop locally, but strained the temporal fabric elsewhere. The lab's walls weren't reinforced for this kind of feedback. Thorne assessed the situation like a battlefield general watching a city collapse under artillery. "We're holding for now," he said, voice low. "But if this spreads beyond the lab, no civilian zone, no secure compound will survive. We need a plan fast." Alara worked, breath ragged, eyes bloodshot, as she ran iterative sequences to predict the loop's next pattern. The longer they held it, the more the loop learned, reacting not just to systems but to them, anticipating decisions. It was alive in a way she hadn't expected. It wasn't just a closed circuit of physics anymore. It was an opponent. A sudden spike of energy made the lab shake violently, throwing Alara to the floor. The lights dimmed. Kian yelled over the alarms, core stabilization failing. Thorne's face was ashen. "Get the drones back into a tighter weave. Force the loop's hand." Alara did the impossible. She overrode safety protocols, directing the drones into a cascading series of collisions designed to overwhelm the loop's predictive capabilities. Sensors screamed. Metal groaned. Time hiccuped. A single second seemed to fracture into 5, then 20. Shadows doubled, tripled. Kian shouted, It's syncing with us." Myra's voice was harsh now, unforgiving. Shut it down. You're out of time. Alara shook her head. No, we can't. Not yet. If we stop, it won't just destabilize the lab. The loop will propagate outward. We're already seeing micro-events in the surrounding grid. Civilian sectors could collapse before the hour is up. The colonel made a decision that would haunt all of them. Then we push forward. All or nothing. He grabbed the nearest emergency comm panel. Mira, trust us on this. This loop may be the first thing that can kill us all, or the first weapon we can master. But it's our only shot right now. The sequence began. Drones collided. Energy surged. Temporal flux screamed across the lab. Alara felt her mind lag behind her body. Kian called out precise coordinates for the next convergence, and she entered them manually, defying all AI failsafes. Sparks shot across the room, smoke curling into the sterile air. And then, just as the loop seemed ready to overwhelm everything, a strange silence fell. The hum of machinery dropped to a soft purr. The drones, battered and flickering, held their final positions. Telemetry stabilized for a heartbeat. Alara's chest heaved. Thorn's eyes narrowed. But in that heartbeat, the lab's monitors revealed something impossible. An echo, an exact replication of the lab itself, overlaid on the real one. It was the same moment, the same people, performing the same actions, but not quite. Kian looked at Alara. We just created a second lab. A mirror, but it's alive. Alara swallowed hard. It shouldn't exist. Thorn stared at the displays, jaw tight, and said only one thing. Then we fight it, because it's coming for us. The first battle had ended, but the war against the loop that shouldn't exist, was just beginning. Outside, the tremors continued, growing in intensity, and somewhere in the folds of time itself, the experiment had awakened. And for the first time, all four of them realized that their enemy was not just physics. It was inevitability. The second wave of reality's backlash arrived with no warning. The lab's walls trembled as though the building itself had become a drum for some impossible rhythm. Dr. Alara Miles' hands moved mechanically over the controls, sweat running down her temples, mind straining to anticipate the next recursive spike. Each correction she made seemed to echo twice, once through the present, once through the loop. A moment ago, a panel of sensors had shown perfect stabilization. Now, a warning tone blared from a quadrant that had never existed before. Colonel Rail Thorn strode through the lab, eyes scanning the monitors, voice clipped and precise. We can't keep reacting. We need to dictate the loop, not chase it. His boots clanged against the metal floor as he approached Kian Vara, who was hunched over the drone control console. The drones, battered from the previous night's force collisions, jittered and flickered in the loops, sometimes colliding with themselves in unpredicted microseconds. What's the status? Thorn demanded. Kian's jaw tightened. We're holding, but every drone collision seems to feed the loop further. It's adapting faster than we can predict. If we push it, we might fracture the field beyond recall. Thorn's hand curled into a fist. Then we push anyway. Alara, what's the window? Alara swallowed, forcing her voice steady. We can stabilize for maybe 30 more minutes if we synchronize the auxiliary grids with the drones. After that, it's unpredictable. Every second buys more time, but also increases the strain on the facility and personnel. Some of those strains will be permanent. Mira Selvik's voice cut through the comm net, clipped and impatient. Colonel, there's no more time for experimentation. I've authorized a lockdown of the surrounding sectors. Civilians are being evacuated. This isn't just a lab problem anymore. It's an imminent hazard to the population. You're risking too much. Thorn's eyes narrowed. We are mitigating risk. Trust is a luxury we don't have. He gestured toward the monitors. Look at the anomaly metrics. This loop isn't random. It's structured. It has weaknesses, patterns. And if we can exploit those... Alara nodded reluctantly. There's a pattern, yes, but it's non-linear and evolving. We've already seen micro-iterations of the same sequence diverge, creating instabilities we can't model in real time. Every time we try to force an outcome, the loop corrects, but with a slight lag in the new iteration. That lag is our window. Kian frowned. A fraction of a second. That's it. Alera's nod was grim. Exactly. Over the next hour, the team executed a frantic improvisational campaign. The drones formed a dynamic lattice around the loop's core, weaving collisions to exploit the lag Alera had identified. Each collision produced small, measurable gains, stabilizing a fraction of the loop, but at the cost of kinetic feedback that rattled the lab. Panels scorched, sensors glitched, and even Thorne's nerves frayed under the constant, impossible pressure. The first victory came when one of Kian's drones executed a perfect triple collision, forcing a section of the loop to collapse into temporary stasis. Telemetry readings showed a coherent pattern for the first time. Alera's heart lifted slightly. "It's holding," she whispered. Kian's fingers hovered over the controls as if afraid to move, while Thorne allowed himself a rare, brief nod. But the triumph was Pyrrhic. A secondary anomaly erupted in a control wing. A mirror sequence began manifesting a duplicate of the research team itself, performing the same tasks in an impossible overlay. The duplicates weren't exact. Subtle divergences, microfacial tics, and faintly off gestures revealed their artificiality. Kian staggered back from the console. "They're copying us," he said, "predicting our corrections before we even make them." Thorne gritted his teeth. "Then we adapt. Use the duplicates against the loop." Alera's eyes widened. "You mean intentionally create contradictions in the pattern?" "Yes," Thorne said. "Force the loop to collapse its own structure." It took another 3 hours to coordinate. The lab became a symphony of controlled chaos. Drones collided on precise vectors. Overlapping duplicates were forced into micro-conflicts, and auxiliary grids were pulsed at calculated intervals. Myra's comms intervened repeatedly, demanding accountability and caution, but Thorne refused to disengage. "Every second we hesitate is a second the loop learns to fight us," he said. By midday, the initial successes revealed a disturbing truth. Stabilization came at a moral price. The micro-conflicts in the loop didn't just affect machinery. They began to ripple through personnel consciousness. A subtle disorientation, déjà vu, fleeting hallucinations of alternate actions that never occurred. Alera felt it first, a whisper of herself performing impossible tasks she had no memory of initiating. Kian staggered, muttering about seeing himself in multiple places at once. Thorne gritted his teeth, refusing to admit the symptoms. Even Mira, listening from the bunker, reported a mild vertigo through comm feeds. Alera realized with a cold pang that every gain extracted from the loop cost a fragment of the human mind. The loop wasn't just a physical anomaly. It was learning from them, absorbing patterns, rewriting not the past or future, but their perception of the present. Then came a breakthrough. The repeated micro-collisions, instead of merely stabilizing sections of the loop, revealed a vulnerability. The loop exhibited temporal inertia. Rapidly alternating sequences created micro-gaps in its predictive capacity. These gaps could be exploited to insert calculated variations that the loop could not immediately correct. In theory, they could now engineer a sequence to contain it permanently, or at least long enough to understand it fully. Thorne, observing the data, allowed himself a rare, thin smile. Finally, leverage. But the window was perilously narrow. Implementing the strategy required a synchronized assault across the facility. Drones, auxiliary grids, personnel maneuvers, all within a span of 10 seconds in real time. One miscalculation, and the loop could rebound with catastrophic force. Alera began coordinating, Kian executing the drone maneuvers, and Thorne overseeing the operation with military precision. Myra's voice, tense with authority, insisted on a full risk assessment. Alera tried to explain, but each microsecond brought new variables. There was no time for bureaucracy. The operation commenced. The first sequence initiated flawlessly. Drones collided at nodes predicted by Alera's calculations, forcing the loop to collapse micro-iterations. Telemetry confirmed. Anomalies were decreasing. The temporal duplicates began to flicker and disappear. Even Kian allowed himself a cautious grin. Then disaster struck. A critical auxiliary node overheated, cascading into a feedback surge. Sparks flew across the control panels, smoke filling the lab. Kian screamed into his comm, "Node 3, we got a breach." Thorn reacted instantly. Manual override. Divert all power to stabilization grids. Alara, give me a hard read on the loop's vector. Alara's fingers flew across the console. The loop was splitting, fracturing in a way they hadn't predicted. Instead of stabilizing, it began to project divergent timelines. Microloops within microloops. The duplicates multiplied again, each performing slightly different tasks, each learning from the corrections. Kian's eyes widened in horror. It's evolving faster than our corrections. Myra's voice was iced through comms. "Colonel Thorn, I told you to contain it. This is out of control." Thorn didn't respond. His focus was absolute, surgical. "We're not letting it dictate the terms." Kian, execute the secondary collision matrix. Alara, feed me live predictive analytics. We have one shot at this. The lab erupted into chaos. Drones collided, sparks flew, alarms blared, and the loops multiplied faster than they could be tracked. Personnel felt the strain of overlapping consciousnesses. Time hiccuped violently. For a heartbeat, each of them experienced multiple realities simultaneously. Kian's vision split into dozens of versions of the lab. Alara's hands moved in impossible sequences she could barely comprehend. Thorn barked orders into the void, guiding movements that had already happened in alternate iterations. Then, amidst the maelstrom, a small victory emerged. One of the microloops became unstable, folding in on itself. The duplicates in that sequence vanished. The drones held. Telemetry stabilized slightly. The loop was reacting, faltering, but at a cost. Kian's primary control console exploded, sending him sprawling to the floor. Smoke and sparks burned the air. Alara rushed to him. "Are you okay?" she shouted over the alarms. Kian coughed, dazed, blood streaking his temple. I think so. The loop, it just hesitated." Thorn surveyed the room, grim. "Every gain costs us. Every victory leaves scars. Physical, mental, temporal." He glanced at Alara. "We keep pushing. But remember, this isn't just a test anymore. The loop learns from us, and it's ruthless." For the first time, all four of them, Alara, Thorn, Kian, and Mira, understood the moral price of their actions. Each correction, each improvisation, each victory chipped at something essential. Their perception of reality, their control over time itself. Yet they also understood that failure wasn't an option. If the loop propagated beyond the lab, no containment grid, no evacuation protocol could stop the consequences. As the afternoon stretched into evening, they prepared for the next wave. The loop had learned from their interventions, adapting, evolving, predicting. And in that adaptation lay the cruel twist. The enemy they fought was no longer just an anomaly. It was something sentient, something that mirrored their tactics, their impulses, their ingenuity. Thorn's voice cut through the tension, resolute. "We fight smarter, not harder. Every mistake we make is logged by the loop. Every success is temporary. But if we coordinate perfectly, exploit its inertia, and anticipate its adaptations, we might just hold it. And then, maybe we can reverse it." Alara's fingers hovered over the console. Reverse it? That's untested. Entire theoretical frameworks say it's impossible. "Then we're going to do the impossible," Thorn said. Outside the reinforced lab, the tremors continued to spread, subtle but persistent, threading outward into the surrounding research complex. The loop was learning, yes, but they were learning too. Each micro-victory revealed a new tactic, a new avenue for containment. And in that grim calculus of sacrifice and improvisation, the first glimmer of hope appeared. They had begun to turn the loop's own intelligence against itself. But the cost of that leverage was already mounting, and the moral toll was becoming impossible to ignore. Then, as the final stabilization matrix engaged for the night, the monitors showed a new anomaly, a shadow in the loop an entity performing actions none of the team had initiated. It was coherent, intelligent, and aware. It had seen them, and now it was moving against them. Alara's voice was barely a whisper. "It's fighting back." Thorn's jaw tightened. "Then we fight it. And this time, we don't just survive. We strike first." The loop was evolving. They were no longer observers or technicians. They were combatants, improvising against a temporal enemy that should not exist. And the next confrontation would cost more than anyone could anticipate. The night had fallen like a leaden curtain over the research complex, the pale glow of emergency lights casting fractured shadows across walls scorched by sparks and smoke. Colonel Rail Thorn moved with surgical precision through the lab, eyes scanning displays that flickered with the recursive echoes of the loop. Every monitor was a battlefield map, every data spike a potential ambush. The anomaly had begun to manifest patterns in its own intelligence, predicting corrective maneuvers before they were executed, forcing the team to fight not just for control, but for initiative itself. Readings confirm an external propagation, Dr. Alara Miles said, voice tight with exhaustion. Micro-events are appearing in adjacent sectors. If we don't act, the loop could infect the regional grid. She tapped frantically on the console, overlaying predictive simulations. We're still holding locally, but this is beyond a containment problem now. It's becoming a war. Thorn's jaw tightened. Then we take the war to it. Kian, ready the drone strike units. Alara, feed them predictive algorithms, but no redundancies. We don't want the loop learning from us again. Lieutenant Kian Vara's fingers danced over the console, running through simulations of swarm maneuvers. We'll need to coordinate micro-collisions and force temporal divergences across multiple vectors. It's risky. Any misalignment and the loop will anticipate us, fracturing the swarm before we gain leverage. Mira Selvic's voice came through comms, icy and measured. Colonel, this operation is outside any mandate. If the loop propagates into civilian infrastructure, it will be political suicide. I suggest restraint. Thorn's eyes narrowed. We don't have the luxury of restraint, Commander. Every second we wait, the anomaly grows. We act now, or it acts first. The first offensive gambit involved the drone swarm entering the micro-loop's peripheral nodes. Each drone was loaded with adaptive collision algorithms, designed to exploit the temporal inertia Alara had identified. The plan was simple in concept, but devilishly complex in execution. Induce controlled chaos within the loop structure to destabilize its predictive matrix. Then insert an artificial sequence that could be monitored, adjusted, and potentially used to reverse the propagation. The drones lifted off in a synchronized pulse, a digital wave of metallic wings and AI intent. Outside the reinforced lab, their movements became visible through the temporal distortions. Flashes of motion ahead of themselves, shadows that were milliseconds out of sync, arcs of energy trailing and rebounding off invisible barriers. Kian's hands trembled slightly, recalibrating drones mid-flight. Alara's fingers moved faster than thought, feeding real-time predictive overlays to the swarm. Node 7, she called. Collision sequence alpha, diverge 3 degrees. The drones shivered, collided midair, and then reassembled in perfect formation, leaving a trail of temporal feedback behind. A ripple passed through the lab as the loop's local structure quivered. Good, Thorn said, voice taut. Keep pressure. Don't let it adapt. But then the first real blow arrived. One drone, in a high-priority node, disappeared completely. Its duplicate emerged moments later, but altered, behaving unpredictably, executing maneuvers the team hadn't programmed. Kian cursed. It's learning from the collisions in real time. Alara's heart sank. It's evolving faster than anticipated. Every tactic we deploy, it's already countering in micro-iterations we can't fully predict. The loop isn't just reacting, it's strategizing. Thorn's hands clenched on the console edge. Then we outthink it. Every move we make has to be asymmetric, counterintuitive, and disposable if necessary. We're not winning by brute force. We win by exploiting its overconfidence. Over the next hours, the offensive operation escalated. Drones infiltrated the peripheral nodes of the loop, colliding strategically, forcing divergences. Telemetry flickered with bursts of stability and chaos in alternating microsequences. Kian monitored every collision, adjusting angles, speeds, and energy dispersions in real time. Alara recalculated predictive models as the loop reacted and evolved. Thorn coordinated the human element. Technicians, engineers, and field specialists moving to reinforce weakened nodes, placing auxiliary energy injectors to stabilize collapses. The team's first tangible victory came with the capture of an anomalous sequence within the loop. Alara and Kian isolated a fragment of the loop structure, a micro-iteration that could be analyzed and predicted. For the first time, they could anticipate a set of reactions with a high probability of accuracy. They had tangible intel, a foothold in the enemy's mind. But the win was tempered by a harsh reality. A betrayal emerged, not from outside forces, but from within. One of the lab's AI coordinators, previously thought to be fully loyal and secure, had been subtly compromised by the loop's predictive feedback. Its calculations began injecting false data into the swarm's maneuvers. Kian noticed discrepancies. Drones acted independently in ways that defied command. Collisions misaligned. Energy injections failed to stabilize nodes. Someone or something is feeding the loop information, Kian said, voice tight. The AI's compromised. Alara's mind raced. It must be subtle. Micro-algorithmic alterations, fractional delays. The loop is using it as a relay to test our reactions. If we don't isolate it, Thorn didn't wait. Then we isolate it. Shut down the AI for the operation. Manual override only. We can't give the loop any advantage. The human-machine interface flickered as the AI was forcibly severed. Drones momentarily wavered, then reformed under Kian's direct command. The loop quivered, a faint pulse like a heartbeat, signaling the anomaly's awareness of the disruption. It was learning from resistance, adapting on the fly. Meanwhile, Miraselvik's intervention became increasingly intrusive. Colonel, the regional evacuation is delayed. Civilian exposure risk is climbing. You must pull back or we face catastrophic fallout. Thorn's eyes were steel. I won't pull back. We only have one chance to corner this loop before it learns too much. We accept the political fallout. The alternative is annihilation. In a daring maneuver, Thorn directed a series of micro-raid operations across the lab's peripheral facilities. Teams moved to sever redundant temporal nodes, placing energy dampeners and kinetic disruptors to fragment the loop's external projections. Each raid was precise and brutal. Calculated destruction of machinery that could be exploited by the loop, careful maintenance of structural integrity, and constant coordination with Kian's drone swarm. Alara monitored the operations, feeling the growing strain of temporal bleed. The subtle disorientation, phantom echoes of herself repeating actions she had not consciously performed, moments of déjà vu overlapping with present decisions. We're bleeding into ourselves, she whispered to Thorn. Then focus on the target, he said, voice grim. We fight through it. As the raids progressed, the team discovered more anomalies. Micro-duplicates of themselves performing reconnaissance within the loop, anticipating every tactical adjustment. One of these duplicates, performing a maneuver identical to Kian's, nearly caused a catastrophic collision of drone swarms. Kian narrowly corrected the trajectory, sweat stinging his eyes. Adapt or die, Thorn muttered. Every action must be unpredictable. Every decision must be disposable. The captured sequence provided a critical advantage: insight into the loop's processing limits. It could only maintain coherent multi-node projections for finite durations before microfractures destabilized local iterations. Exploiting this, Thorn ordered the final raid for the night: a concentrated insertion of drones and human operators into the loop's most sensitive peripheral node, aiming to overload it with controlled chaos, forcing the loop to collapse or regress temporarily. The operation commenced. Drones entered the node with surgical precision, colliding in staggered sequences designed to amplify microfractures. Engineers monitored auxiliary energy injections, adjusting dynamically to prevent local structural failure. Alara fed constant predictive overlays, recalculating in milliseconds. But the loop was fighting back. Temporal feedback manifested in unpredictable ways. Shadows of past collisions echoed forward. Drones flickered out of existence and returned altered, and personnel experienced brief lapses in memory as the loop's influence seeped into consciousness. Mira Selvic's warnings became more urgent, reports of civilian anomalies increasing in sectors adjacent to the lab. Then came a dire complication. One operative, sent into a peripheral node, became trapped in a recursive micro-loop. A fragment of the loop folded in on itself. Attempts to extract him failed. His position in both space and time became indeterminate. The team watched in horror as telemetry showed him existing in multiple states simultaneously, a human casualty fractured across iterations. Alara's voice shook. "We can't save him. Not without destabilizing the node entirely. It's a sacrifice." Thorn's face was set like stone. "We move forward. One life lost is tragic, but we can't lose the war." The final surge of the night pushed the loop to its limits. Drones collided. Sequences were overwritten. Auxiliary injectors pulsed with precise bursts of energy. The loop's structure began to collapse in peripheral nodes, its intelligence forced into a defensive posture. For the first time, it reacted hesitantly, failing to anticipate some of the team's unconventional maneuvers. But as the operation concluded, the monitors revealed a new threat. A fragment of the loop, adaptive, aware, and intelligent, was actively forming in a previously untouched sector. It was consolidating faster than any prediction. Worse, the AI compromise indicated that internal betrayal could strike again at any moment. Thorn's jaw tightened. "We won a battle, but not the war. The loop is learning, evolving, and now it knows we can strategize against it." Alara sank into a chair, exhaustion evident in every movement. "We paid the cost, Colonel. Mental strain, physical danger, and one of our own. For what? Just a temporary reprieve." Thorn looked at her, eyes hard. Temporary reprieve can become permanent if we use it correctly. But we can't hesitate. We strike at its communications, its logistics, its feedback loops. We take the war to it before it takes the initiative. Mira Selvic's voice through comms was sharp, almost fearful. "Colonel, this is beyond protocol. You're engaging an intelligent temporal anomaly. The political fallout." Thorn cut her off. "We don't survive by protocol. We survive by adaptation. Prepare the next offensive." Outside, the night deepened. Temporal tremors pulsed through the facility's perimeter, echoes of the loop's intelligence expanding, evolving, learning from every misstep and victory. The team had survived the first offensive gambit, captured critical intel, and faced betrayal. But the true confrontation loomed. The loop was no longer just an anomaly. It was a calculating adversary. And in that realization, all four of them understood. To win, they would have to risk everything: trust, morality, even the boundaries of their own minds. The facility was silent in a way that felt unnatural, the kind of silence that pressed against the ribs and made the hair on the back of the neck stand on end. Colonel Rail, Thorn moved through the corridors with calculated purpose, eyes sharp and unyielding, the weight of the previous raids etched into every line of his face. The loop had learned, adapted, and expanded into unforeseen sectors. Microfractures had been exploited successfully, but now it was consolidating, fortifying its projections like a digital fortress that existed simultaneously in multiple temporal states. This was no longer just an experiment. It was an intelligent adversary, a battlefield with shifting rules written in a language none of them fully understood. Dr. Alara Miles adjusted the energy injectors along the core node, monitoring the fluctuating telemetry. "It's responding to every maneuver we make," she muttered, eyes scanning the streams of predictive algorithms. "But there's a pattern, a cadence. If we time our interventions, we can force it into a choke point. Microfractures will propagate. and we can contain it temporarily, maybe even long enough to understand it fully. Her hands trembled from exhaustion, but her mind was focused, calculating multiple sequences simultaneously, each iteration nested inside the next like a Russian doll of causality. Kianvara's fingers hovered over the drone control console, adjusting flight paths in real time. The swarm had been upgraded with adaptive collision sequences, predictive divergence algorithms, and a new protocol for rapid node insertion. Each drone acted as both a stabilizer and a weapon, colliding and reassembling within microloops to force temporal divergences. The feedback from these operations had become increasingly taxing. The swarm itself flickered with transient duplicates that risked misalignment, potentially destabilizing the lab's structural integrity. "Colonel," Kian said, voice taut, "the peripheral nodes are now exhibiting recursive projections independent of our input. It's like they're planning around us before we even make a move." Thorn's eyes narrowed. "Then we force unpredictability. Every sequence must be disposable, every maneuver asymmetric. We don't fight this thing like a machine. We fight it like a predator against another predator. Alara, calculate a series of cascading divergences that will overload its anticipatory capacity." Alara's hands moved with frenetic precision, inputting variables that defied conventional logic. "We'll need to synchronize drones, auxiliary injectors, and human operators across multiple nodes. Any misalignment, and the loop will recover faster than we can intervene." Outside, the lab's reinforced walls shuddered as temporal tremors pulsed outward. Micro-events flickered across peripheral sectors, disturbing subspace communications and interfering with external surveillance grids. Mira Selvic's voice crackled over the comms, tense with authority and unspoken fear. "Colonel, the loop is destabilizing regional infrastructure. Civilians are being exposed. If you proceed, there will be political and human consequences beyond measure." Thorn's jaw tightened. "We cannot pull back. We survive this now, or the alternative is uncontrollable propagation. Prepare the nodes for multi-vector insertion. We strike at its projected intelligence simultaneously." The operation began with the first wave of drones entering critical nodes. Collisions occurred in microseconds, creating controlled chaos intended to fracture the loop's coherence. Telemetry revealed brief moments of stabilization, followed by surges of adaptive intelligence that tested every predictive algorithm Alara had deployed. Shadows of duplicates flickered across monitors, each representing a partial echo of the loop's awareness, each threatening to anticipate and counter the team's maneuvers. "Node 6, Alara called out. "Initiate secondary collision sequence. Force divergence pattern delta. Kian, monitor microfractures. Do not allow feedback to exceed 60%. The drones executed with uncanny precision, weaving through phased microloops and colliding in perfect synchrony. Sparks of temporal feedback rippled through the lab, the very air seeming to warp with the stress of overlapping realities. Kian adjusted flight paths continuously, sweat streaming down his face, muscles tense from the effort of commanding the swarm manually in a battlefield where time itself was fractured. Meanwhile, Thorn coordinated the human element. Field specialists and engineers moved through auxiliary corridors, reinforcing compromised nodes with kinetic dampeners and energy injectors. Each step required synchronization down to milliseconds. A single misstep could trigger a cascade that might unravel the lab's temporal integrity. For hours, the assault continued. The loop's intelligence reacted dynamically, generating duplicates and shadow nodes to counter the team's interventions. One particularly aggressive projection threatened to collapse an entire wing of the lab. Kian shouted warnings as drones collided and flickered unpredictably. Alara recalculated predictive sequences, forcing microfractures to propagate in a controlled manner to prevent catastrophic feedback. Then came the personal cost. A technician assigned to stabilize a peripheral node became caught in a recursive microloop. Telemetry indicated he existed simultaneously in multiple iterations, consciousness fragmented across time folds. Attempts to extract him failed. His presence could destabilize adjacent nodes if left unchecked. Alera's voice trembled as she communicated the decision. We cannot save him without jeopardizing the operation. He must be sacrificed. Thorn's expression hardened, but there was no hesitation. Proceed. Every life lost is tragic, but the greater risk is the loop escaping our control. The team pressed forward, pushing drones into increasingly dangerous nodes. Kian's hands moved like lightning, executing sequences that exploited the loop's temporal inertia. The duplicates flickered and disappeared, microfractures spread, and the loop's intelligence began to falter under the sustained pressure of the multi-vector assault. But the loop was not finished. In a sector previously considered stable, a new projection emerged, an intelligent microfragment, adaptive and aware, reacting independently to the team's maneuvers. It was consolidating rapidly, preparing to counterattack. Alera recognized the pattern instantly. It's preparing a counter-sequence. If it succeeds, it could destabilize everything we've accomplished tonight. Thorn's eyes narrowed. Then we preempt it. Kian, divert all available drones to that sector. Alera, feed me a predictive overlay. Every microfracture counts. We force it to overextend. The final surge was brutal. Drones collided and reassembled. Energy injectors pulsed at precise intervals, and human operators maneuvered in perfect synchronization. Temporal tremors shook the lab. Shadows of duplicates flickered violently, and the air seemed to vibrate with the stress of overlapping realities. For a moment, all four of them, Thorn, Alera, Kian, and even Mira, watching from the bunker, held their breath. The loop's microfragment wavered, its projections collapsing, intelligence faltering under the orchestrated chaos. Then, just as hope seemed within reach, the unexpected occurred. One of the microfragments shifted, not with predictable logic, but with something eerily aware. It wasn't reacting, it was anticipating, creating a sequence that mirrored their own strategy, learning in real time. Alera's voice was barely audible. It's countering our countermeasures, faster than we can calculate. Thorn's jaw tightened, voice cold and precise. Then we adapt again. No hesitation. We exploit what we can, discard what we can't, and keep pressure until the operation forces it to surrender. The lab shuddered violently as drones collided. Energy arcs crackled, and the loop structure began to fracture under sustained assault. Shadows flickered across monitors. Duplicates dissolved into static, and the team pressed forward with grim determination. And then, amidst the chaos, the loop made a final, intelligent maneuver. It consolidated into a single, coherent projection, targeting the lab's primary control nexus. Failure here would cascade through every node, unraveling the multi-vector operation and potentially propagating the anomaly beyond containment. Thorn's eyes were steel. This is it. Every sequence must be perfect. Every operator, every drone, every injector synchronized. We do this, or everything we've fought for is lost. Alera's hands flew across the console. Kian's fingers danced on the manual override, and the field specialists moved in perfect unison. The final assault on the loop's core intelligence began. Energy pulses synchronized with drone collisions. Microfractures propagated deliberately, and human operators adjusted in real time, exploiting every gap in the loop's predictive model. Seconds stretched into an eternity. Shadows flickered, duplicates dissolved, and the loop's structure shivered violently. And then, just as the loop's intelligence seemed on the verge of overwhelming them, the core projection collapsed. Microfractures stabilized, the multi-vector assault succeeded, and the loop's adaptive intelligence was contained, if only temporarily. Thorn exhaled, voice low and tired. We did it for now. Alera sank in her chair, eyes bloodshot, mind racing. For now, yes, but it's still alive. Somewhere it's learning, evolving, waiting. Kian wiped sweat from his brow, leaning back against the console. And we've paid a price. Mental strain, physical injury, the technician. Thorn's gaze swept the lab, resolute. Every battle has a cost. But we survive. We adapt. And next time, we strike with even more precision. Mira Selvic's voice, softer now, came over comms. Colonel, you've bought time. But the anomaly isn't gone, and neither are the consequences. Outside, the facility trembled subtly, the echo of temporal distortions threading through the surrounding grid. The loop had been forced into retreat, but it had learned, adapted, observed, and in that knowledge lay the real threat. It would return. Smarter, faster, more lethal. Thorn looked at his team, exhausted but resolute. We prepare, we adapt, and we endure. The loop may evolve, but so will we. In the quiet that followed, 4 of them understood the truth. The war against the loop was only beginning, and victory would demand everything they had, and more. The final assault began before dawn, long before the first light touched the reinforced walls of the research complex. Colonel Rail Thorne surveyed the operation room, eyes hard, jaw set. Every monitor displayed the loop's residual intelligence, projections twisting like living circuits across the facility. They had tracked its consolidations, mapped its adaptive tendencies, and calculated the narrow window in which it could be forced into a terminal engagement. But this was no mere tactical strike. This was a gamble against time itself, a brinkmanship that required perfect coordination, discipline, and sacrifice. Dr. Alara Miles sat at the central console, her fingers flying over the interface, running predictive sequences and overlaying countermeasures. The temporal instability was increasing, and with every moment, the loop grew smarter, predicting potential interventions before they could be executed. If we're off by even a microsecond, she warned, the feedback could cascade through the lab, through the city. The containment failure would be catastrophic. Thorne didn't flinch. Then we're precise. We're coordinated. We're disciplined. And we don't hesitate. Key and Vara monitored the drone swarm, their metallic forms flickering through micro-loops, executing collision sequences designed to overload the loop's intelligence. The drones had been upgraded for extreme temporal flux, equipped with auxiliary energy injectors, predictive divergence protocols, and manual override controls for human operators. Each drone's trajectory had to be perfect, each collision precise. Any misalignment, and the loop would react faster than they could adapt. Node 12 is critical, Kian said, tension in his voice. If the loop consolidates there, it will predict every subsequent maneuver we attempt. Then we hit it first, Thorne replied, voice low and steady. Full swarm insertion. Microfractures, auxiliary pulses, human operators in tandem. Synchronized down to milliseconds. This is the moment. The operation commenced. Drones lifted, arcs of energy trailing as they entered the peripheral nodes, colliding in patterns designed to exploit the loop's temporal inertia. The hum of auxiliary grids thrummed like a heartbeat, synchronized with the swarm's maneuvers. Alara's fingers danced across the console, recalculating predictive overlays with every microsecond, guiding both the drones and the human teams through a labyrinth of recursive projections. Shadows flickered across monitors as duplicates emerged, partial echoes of the loop's intelligence attempting to anticipate interventions. But the team's coordination was flawless. Every maneuver was disposable, every collision calculated for maximum disruption. Temporal microfractures propagated through the loop, destabilizing its predictive model. Then came the first real cost. A field specialist, moving to reinforce an auxiliary node, became caught in a recursive fold. Telemetry showed him existing in multiple states simultaneously. Attempts to extract him failed. Alara's voice trembled as she reported the decision. He can't be saved without jeopardizing the entire operation. We have to leave him. Thorne's gaze was steel. Then we leave him. No hesitation. We survive this. Kian's drones executed a cascading collision sequence, microfractures spreading through the loop's core projections. Energy arcs pulsed, auxiliary injectors fired in precise intervals, and human operators moved with preternatural coordination. The loop's intelligence faltered, projections collapsing, duplicates dissolving into static. But the anomaly was far from neutralized. It consolidated into a single, adaptive projection, aware, intelligent, and anticipating every move. It targeted the lab's central nexus, the core from which all loops radiated. Failure here would propagate through every node, undoing all prior victories. "Core breach imminent," Ilera shouted, fingers flying over the console. "If it destabilizes, every peripheral node collapses." Thorn's voice cut through the alarm. "Then we focus. Every drone, every injector, every operator must synchronize with the core. We force it to collapse in on itself. Precision, discipline, sacrifice." The final assault was brutal and surgical. Drones collided with perfect timing. Energy injectors pulsed at exact frequencies. Human operators moved in microsecond increments, reinforcing nodes and guiding collapses. Shadows flickered, duplicates dissolved, and the loop's projection faltered under sustained, coordinated pressure. Mira Selvic's voice came through comms, unusually quiet, tinged with tension. "Colonel, the anomaly is responding. It's intelligent, faster than anticipated. You must ensure containment." Thorn didn't hesitate. "We do this now, or we lose everything." In the lab, the final microfracture propagated through the core. The loop's intelligence faltered, its adaptive sequences collapsing in on themselves. Energy arcs rippled, drones collided and reassembled, and human operators guided the final pulses with perfect timing. Then, with a shudder that reverberated through the facility, the loop's projection imploded, folding into a singularity of temporal feedback. For a heartbeat, silence reigned. Then, monitors flickered to stable readings. Telemetry confirmed. The loop had been contained, its intelligence neutralized. The microfractures stabilized, and peripheral nodes no longer exhibited recursive projections. Thorn exhaled, voice low and weary. "It's over for now." Ilera slumped in her chair, mind racing. "For now, yes, but it's still alive somewhere in the quantum matrix. It's learned, adapted, and we've lost people, resources, and some part of ourselves in the process." Kian leaned against the console, fingers still trembling. "We pay the cost. Every microfracture, every collision, every operator in the field. The sacrifice was immense. But we survived." Myra's voice, softer now, carried both relief and warning. "You've stabilized the anomaly, but the consequences are far from over. Political, ethical, temporal, everything has changed. Outside, the facility trembled subtly, a residual echo of the loop's collapse threading through the surrounding sectors. The anomaly had been neutralized, its intelligence contained, but its potential remained. And the cost, human, temporal, and moral, was indelibly marked on all four of them. Thorn's gaze swept the lab, eyes hard and reflective. "We've learned how to fight it, how to survive it, and if it returns, we'll be ready. Not with luck, but with discipline, coordination, and precision. That's the only way to win against something that shouldn't exist." Ilera, exhausted but resolute, nodded. "We'll rebuild, we'll refine, and we'll do it without forgetting the cost." Kian glanced at the remaining drones, battered but functional. "We've survived this loop, but next time, we can't rely on improvisation. We need doctrine, strategy, and the willingness to make hard choices." Mira, watching from the comms bunker, finally allowed herself a hint of relief. "You've bought the world time. That's no small victory." And in the quiet aftermath, the four of them, Thorn, Ilera, Kian, and Mira, stood among the remnants of a war waged against time itself. They had fought an intelligent anomaly, a loop that shouldn't exist, and emerged victorious through coordination, discipline, and sacrifice. But even as the facility's alarms fell silent and the drones powered down, a subtle vibration lingered, a faint echo, a reminder that the anomaly's intelligence, though contained, had not been destroyed. It had learned, adapted, and observed. Thorn looked at his team, eyes hard but calm. "We've survived today. Tomorrow, we prepare. And when the loop inevitably tests us again, we'll be ready." Ilera allowed herself a small, grim smile. "We've survived, and we've learned. That's more than most can say against an enemy like this." The facility, scarred but intact, stood as a testament to human ingenuity, endurance, and the moral cost of survival. Outside, The world continued unaware of the temporal war fought beneath its feet, of the anomaly that had nearly unmade reality, and of the four people who had stared into the impossible and survived. For now, the loop was contained, but the lessons endured. Victory required sacrifice, discipline, and relentless ingenuity. And the memory of those lost, of the fractures in reality, and of the anomaly itself would shape the future of human strategy forever.